Today, our journey takes us to Tampa, Florida, where we will unwrap the story of an uncommon coach and one who leads with a quiet strength. In a profession where the trademark of success is defined by achievement, our guest has reached the pinnacle with titles as best-selling author, Coach of the Year, Super Bowl champion, Hall of Fame coach, and originator of Tampa 2. But as we listen and hear his heart, these accomplishments are just a mere shadow of his true story, one of significance birthed in his true identity as a son, brother, husband, father, friend, mentor, and most importantly, child of God. My name is Ken Karcher, and I'll be your host. And alongside me is my son, Austin Karcher, the co-host. Today, we'd like to welcome Tony Dungy as our guest to Awaken Kingdom Culture, where hearts and minds come alive, one story at a time. Welcome, Tony.
Hey, Ken and Austin, thank you for having me, and thank you for that great introduction. I appreciate that.
Well, we think the world of you, and you're deserving. But well, let's just get started, Tony, and let's start back to when you were just a young boy growing up in Michigan. And give me one word that would describe the Dungy home growing up.
I think that would have to be, it would either be education or purpose. Both of my parents were teachers, and they loved learning, they loved teaching, and they got that message across to us that learning was important. But then it also was, what is your purpose going to be in life? And I'm so glad to have the parents that I had who talked about that. Not necessarily what you're going to do, but what is your purpose going to be? How are you going to do it? What are you going to be all about as a person? And I learned that from them at a very, very early age.
Tell us a little bit about your siblings. I think you had 3 other siblings?
Yes. As I mentioned, my parents were teachers. My mom taught English and public speaking. My dad was a science, biology, zoology teacher. So my siblings kind of gravitated towards that that scientific end. And my oldest sister was a nurse for a long time. She worked in the prison system, actually in Jackson, Michigan. And I have a younger twin brother and sister. And my sister is a doctor. She specializes in high-risk pregnancy, and she's delivered hundreds of babies that many of them weren't supposed to survive. And she is just one of the best in the world at what she does. And then my brother was a dentist. So as I say, they went into the science. I wasn't quite that smart, so I had to go into physical education.
Austin, good.
So, Coach Dungy, what was maybe your most memorable conversation or moment with your dad?
My dad was probably a lot like your dad, Austin. I would talk to him about life and going forward, and he was the one that got me into sports and showed me how to play almost every sport that I knew how to play. But he always talked about not following the crowd and doing things that because you wanted to, and things that were going to put you in position later on in life. And my dad grew up in the segregation era where it was difficult, and it wasn't the way we know life in America now, but he never let that stop him, never let it bother him. And he always talked to us about doing things to make things better. What can you do to make the situation better? And it used to get on my nerves a little bit because I would come home and, with a complaint, Dad, they didn't put me in the game today, or Dad, they never threw me the ball, or I was batting 8th and I should be batting 3rd. I don't know why I'm here or there. And he'd listen, but then he'd always say, okay, well, what are you going to do to make it better? How are you going to go to practice tomorrow to make them put you in the game more? Or what are you going to do to get that from a C to a B to an A? And I would like to say, Dad, don't you even want to hear what I'm complaining about? I got it, but the complaining doesn't do anything. What are you going to do to make it better? And that was that's something that stuck with me the rest of my life.
When do you feel like that clicked for you? Like when it finally resonated with you, his wisdom?
I think it really started clicking when I got to college, and I played for a legendary quarterback coach at University of Minnesota named Tom Moore. He's still coaching today in the NFL. But my dad would tell me things, hey, you've got to calm down. You can't be a hothead out there. And it would go in one ear and out the other. And then Coach Moore would say, I'm not going to put you in the game unless you calm down. You got to be emotionally under control. And I'd say, oh, that's what my dad used to say. And somehow when your coach says it, it makes a little more sense. Yeah.
It's amazing to think of Tony Dungy in the same words as losing his cool, because most people don't know that part of you, Tony.
Oh, man, let me tell you, I got kicked out of basketball games, technical fouls, personal foul penalties, arguing with the refs. If we lost the game, I was really, really unbearable to be around because my whole identity was wrapped up in my sport. So if we lost, that meant that I was a loser, and I didn't want that. And I was just, I was terrible coming up through high school and the early parts of college. It wasn't until I really started grasping what the Lord had in store for me and what God really thought about those things that I really start to follow my parents' instructions a little bit better.
It's interesting where this conversation's going, because I literally this morning with my own son who's 6 years old, my wife was going to take him to co-op today, and he's sitting there whining and complaining, and we're sitting there trying to get him to change his perception or perspective more to a kingdom and perspective of where, trying to be a man of self-control. It's okay to be frustrated, but, learning how to control it and just to see, everybody has to go through that process, even starting from a young age.
You really do. And that's called maturity. And a lot of it is Christian maturity. And I didn't understand that. Even when I was in college, okay, I'm going to calm down and be under control because that's what my coach wants me to do. And that's how I'm going to get in the game. But it took me a little while longer till I got to the Steelers. And I was around some really, really strong Christian athletes who showed me that, not only does your coach want that, and not only is that going to help you play better, but that's really what God wants, and that's going to help you live better.
Yes. So you kind of touched on this earlier, but who are some of your early athletic influences, Coach?
Yeah, my coaches really, when I think back, my Pee Wee football coach, I owe him an awful lot. And then, my high school coach who I actually quit the team between my junior and senior year because I thought I was 17 years old, so I had to be smarter than the coach. We had some kind of butting heads back and forth, but he really had my best interests at heart and wanted me to do well, and he stuck with me. They were really the biggest influences when I was young. But then when I got to the Pittsburgh Steelers, I was 21 years old. And I had heard about the Lord. I had accepted Christ, but I was still focused on myself. And then I got to the Steelers, and Coach Noel put me in the dorm room with Donnie Shell. And Donnie Shell was a tremendous player, very physical safety man, tough as nails, but he had a heart for the Lord. And one of the first things he told me, he said, hey, we have Bible studies after the meetings are over at night. You need to come. I want to see you in chapel every Sunday, and here's how we do it. And I went to the first Bible study, and there's 18, 20 guys in there.
Wow.
And they're all my heroes and guys who I looked up and watching them. And they're telling me, this is great, and you got to make the team. You got to work hard. You got to practice, but this is a temporary thing, and you better make sure you've got your life together. You're honoring the Lord, not just with what you say on Sunday in church, but all the time. And those guys lived it out. And
wow.
Donnie Shell and John Stallworth and John Kolb and Larry Brown, we had some really, really strong, dynamic Christian guys who helped me grow from a babe in Christ to a mature young man when I was 21 years old.
Growing up in Pittsburgh, they were my heroes too, Tony. We'll get to the Steelers in a little bit, but they were my heroes too.
I know.
So, Coach, what were, when you were real young, what were kind of maybe some of the dreams that you had growing up?
I grew up, and it's really funny. It's an automotive town, Jackson, Michigan, a little small town, maybe 40,000 people. Most of the men in the town worked at Goodyear Tire or the glass factory or the metal shop or the Chrysler, GM, Ford plant, and that was kind of the dream. You go to work, you raise a family, you do what you can to provide for your family, and you be a good role model, and that's what I kind of wanted to do growing up. Well, I want to play on the high school team. That's where my heroes played, and if I could do that and then go to work, that would be great. But my mom and dad said, you need to think further along the line than that, down the road. And there's this thing called college that you might want to investigate. And really, none of the guys my age really thought about that. It just wasn't in the process of things. And so I did start. My dad, I can remember him taking me to the University of Michigan and Michigan State games and walking around the campuses. This is what college life is all about, and you need to think about this. And that had an impact on me because I was a short-term thinker, for sure, like most kids are.
Yeah.
And then I did start dreaming about college, and about the 11th grade, I started to get some letters from coaches, and the light went on that maybe this is something I could do.
Awesome. What was maybe one of your favorite high school memories, Coach, as a player?
Well, I'll even start back before that. Little League Baseball, I was 12 years old, and we won the state championship in Michigan. We were down 7-2 in the sixth inning, last inning in Little League, and it looked like it was over, and we scored 8 runs in the last inning. We won the game, became the state champs, and now we're starting to think of going to the Little League World Series. But that was my first championship, and that was pretty special. I got to high school, and basketball was always my favorite sport. That was what I was probably the best in. But I played football, and I did, as I mentioned, I quit after my junior year. And my little assistant principal from middle school, Leroy Rockamore, he actually called me on the phone. He said, I need you to come over to see me. And I walked over to his house, and he hadn't seen me in about 3 years. And he said, word on the street is you're not going to play football. And I said, no, I'm not. And he said, why not? I said, because our coach is a knucklehead, and I can't play for him. And so he listened. He was kind of like my dad. He sat there and listened. And he said, well, even if that's true, why would you not do something that you really enjoy doing? And that's when it hit me. Okay, maybe I am mad at the coach, but I like to play football. Why am I not going to play?
Yeah.
So he had me go back to the coach's house, apologize to Coach Driscoll, and get back on the team. And my senior year, we had a phenomenal team. We were that close to winning the state championship. It was just a fun year. And now the middle of the football season, I'm starting to get all of these letters and scholarship offers and chances to visit schools all over the country. And I couldn't believe it. But if Leroy Rockamore didn't go above and beyond the call of duty, he was the assistant principal at the middle school, but he stepped out of that comfort zone because he said, here's a young man that I know that I could help. And, that to me had an impact on me. It made me want to do the same thing years later, knowing that somebody had an impact on me because they did a little more than just their job description called for.
Well, for me, it's like just sitting here listening, and I'm thinking, one guy's taking the time to have a conversation with you, and then what you've been able to accomplish in the realm of football. I mean, that guy has changed the landscape just by having a conversation and giving you a little vision. And I think it's interesting how Papa does that. Is he sends people along the way to encourage us. Just take that next step. You might not understand it, but just take that next step. So that's awesome. Thank you, Coach, for sharing that. So you started to say you were starting looking into call. Obviously, you're getting recruited. Why did you choose Minnesota, Coach?
I really still fancied myself as a basketball player, and I visited Duke, and they had a really good basketball program, but they didn't have a good football program. I visited some other places, and a lot of the football powerhouses just wanted you to concentrate on football.
Yeah.
And I wanted to really play basketball, and Minnesota was one of the few places that said, okay, you can play quarterback and play basketball. We'll let you do that. They had a great basketball team, Big Ten champions in 1972. And so I just kind of fell in love with it. When I visited there, it looked like a great place to go. And Cal Stahl was the head coach, and he was a very, very positive figure. And he's actually the one that talked to me about being uncommon. And he said, hey, we've got to win a championship here, and the only way we can do it is with uncommon people. And that's what we're looking for. And that struck a chord with me.
Awesome.
I think you even met, that was, like you said earlier, the first time you met Tom Moore and I think Woody Woodenhofer, right?
Yes. Woody Woodenhofer was the area recruiter. He was recruiting us, and there was about 7 or 8 really, really good high school players that year from Michigan that went to Minnesota. And Woody then eventually left and went to the Steelers. Tom Moore coached me my whole college career, and then he went to the Steelers. But we had a great assistant coaching staff, and it was actually a great atmosphere for me. I ended up being a business major. The business school at Minnesota was tremendous. Had some great opportunities to do internships with General Mills and Dayton Hudson, which is now Target. It was just a fantastic place to go to school and learn. Had a fun time there. And again, it's one of those things that God is kind of leading you and directing you. When I was in 10th grade, 9th grade, I didn't even know where Minnesota was.
Well, I know you had a great career there, and record-setting QB and many other accolades. But let's jump to draft day, Coach, because when I was just doing a little research, it really made me feel about my own draft day. 1977. Walk us through your emotions, your thoughts, and what went on that day.
Well, I had talked to some people in the Canadian Football League. Marv Levy was the coach of the Montreal Alouettes, and Bill Polian was the general manager. They had my rights. They talked to me out at the East-West game, and Coach Levy said, you'd be a perfect Canadian League quarterback. You can sign up here, big money, and I said, no, I want to wait for the draft. I want to play in the NFL. And I talked to probably 6 or 7 scouts and assistant coaches from different teams, and people were interested. And so I was pretty certain I was going to get drafted. Well, the draft in 1977 was not like it is today. We sat in our dorm room, and you had a telephone, and that was it. And you'd call other guys if you heard anything. So my roommate, Mike Jones, he got drafted by the Giants in the 5th round. It's probably, late afternoon, and we're celebrating with him. And I'm just waiting and waiting. Well, now it's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and my phone hadn't rang, so we called the Associated Press and said, what round is the draft in right now? And the guy said, the draft's been over for about 2 hours. I said, it couldn't be over. My phone hasn't rang. And I remember walking outside of our room and just walking around the streets in Minneapolis and saying, Lord, I don't understand this. I thought I was going to, get picked. I had a very good career. All these people talked to me, and gosh, it's a dead end now. And that was the first time I really prayed earnestly in a long, long time. And I didn't really get a feel or an answer. I remember just walking around campus, and I walked back in and, well, maybe I should go to the Canadian League. It's not what I want to do, but maybe that's where God is directing me. Well, the next morning I get a call from the Steelers, and they said, we want to sign you. We don't want you to play quarterback. Coach Noel likes people that are flexible, and he thinks you can play a different position and learn. Do you want to sign? And to this day, it doesn't make sense. It really, to have a guaranteed deal in Canada and play the position that I knew, or go to the Steelers for a $2,000 signing bonus and try to make the team when I've never tackled anyone in my life, and try to switch over to defensive back to a team that had 11 guys on the Pro Bowl on defense the previous year. None of that made sense, but something just told me this is what you want to do. And it was the Holy Spirit leading me there, no doubt.
Awesome.
When you look back, Tony, and you've already mentioned Donnie, but do you think that guidance was to get you there with Donnie Shell and his influence spiritually? And then I know Chuck Knoll, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he probably had the largest impact in your coaching career. You want to talk about those guys a little bit, or anybody else?
Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind that God directed me to go there because it didn't make sense. But then after I got there, the lessons that I learned, Ken, were just so unbelievable. The first meeting that we went to as rookies, I'm expecting Coach Knoll to say, okay, you worked hard in high school, you worked hard in college, you got to work even harder, you better put more into it, be ready to go. And he didn't say that at all. In the first meeting, he said, hey, you're now getting paid to play football, so that makes it your profession. But don't make football your whole life. If you make football your whole life, you're going to be disappointed when you leave this game.
Wow.
And that was a shock to me. So I'm writing it down, but it's a shock. And he lived that out. And he talked about family, and he talked about community. And he put me, I'm roommates with Donnie Shell, and said, hey, follow this guy, and he'll show you how to play defense. Well, he showed me a lot more than that. Well, then when you make the team, Art Rooney Sr. was the owner at that time, and he called every rookie in when you make the team and say congratulations, and we're glad to have you here. You're going to love this place. You're going to love the city. You're going to love the team. But we expect some things from you. We expect you to be part of the community. We expect you to be a good role model, and we expect you to give back. So our off days, they had a community service sign-up sheet. And as rookies, you had to sign up and do community service on the off day. But when I got out there and went to these different places, and you make connections with people, you say, wow, this is fun, this is unique, and this is rewarding. And it's just what Coach Knoll said. It's not just those 3 hours on Sunday afternoon that you're on the field, but you're connecting with the community. And it was just a real, real blessing to get there. And there's no doubt in my mind that that's why God sent me there.
Wow. So how would you describe your spiritual journey at this point in your life? Obviously transitioning from, obviously you've touched on it, but, how would you describe it from being a kid, growing to college? Now you're with the Steelers, had the success you had as a player.
Yeah. Austin, I listened to my parents. My mother was a Sunday school teacher, and I heard all this stuff growing up. I accepted Christ when I was really young. So I'm thinking I'm fine. I know I'm going to heaven. But now I get there, and all the guys that I looked up to, they're in Bible study, and they're talking about their future. They're talking about the Lord. These guys have everything that I'm looking for. They're great players. They've got good families. They're married. They've got kids, all the things that I dreamed about. And I'm just watching them. And I'll never forget, we're in one Bible study, and the chaplain is unpacking this verse, and it's Paul talking in 1 Corinthians 9. And he says, don't you know everybody runs, but there's only one first prize, so run to win. Well, that stuck out to me, first of all, because I had never heard that. Everybody usually that talks Christianity, well, God doesn't care if you win or lose. It's just how you do things. And here was Paul saying, no, he expects us to be excellent. He expects us to give our very, very best and try to win. And that was that Steeler team. Those guys, everything was all out, not just to win a Super Bowl, but all out for the Lord, because that's what God expects.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow, this is cool. But then the chaplain said, well, don't stop at that verse. The next verse is, hey, you're doing it for a prize that just fades away. You better make sure you're running the right race, winning the right race, and do it for that eternal prize. And that's what got me to thinking, okay, am I putting all this energy in on the field to be the best athlete I can be, and am I neglecting what's really important? And that's when my life really started changing as a 21-year-old, trying to figure out what was really important to chase after.
Oh, absolutely. It's like I use, a lot of times, because a lot of times in the Christian world, sometimes it's like you don't do things well. Sometimes it appears that way. And I don't believe we're called for that either. But, I believe we're called to do the very best we can, but we play a different game than other people. We play, like you said, an eternal game, one that seeks to know the heart of the Father and to share it with the world.
Yeah, no, so true. But I'll tell you this, and you hit on it. Though we won 4 Super Bowls in a 6-year period, and so much of it was because of the attitude of those Christian players on the team. It wasn't, oh, we won a Super Bowl, so now we can relax. Every single day, they felt like they had to give their very best because that's what God expected. And our practices were unbelievable because those guys were going out all the time. My first year, after I kind of put this together and learned it, my first year, my 2 biggest jobs were to make sure, number one, to make sure the projector bulb was still flashing and that all the film was there. And number 2 was to be the best guy on the look squad to give Terry Bradshaw the right look, to be exactly where that strong safety was going to be that he was going to see on Sunday. And if I was supposed to be here when it was zone and 3 yards deeper when it was man-to-man, I had to be perfect to give them the best look. And once I got that in my mind, that God expects us to be our best at everything, well, it's okay. I'm going to practice the right way on the look squad. I'm going to be in the meetings the right way. I'm going to take the best notes. It just filtered down to everything. And that is the approach that our guys took.
Yeah.
Well, you must have done a good job because we know the success the Steelers had, and I was in my basement cheering you on for all those games. But that's incredible. Let's jump to your coaching career a little bit here, Tony. And I'm going to sum a few of the things up. You're an NFL assistant, I think, for 15 years. Yeah. And the Steelers, and once again, you have a short stint with the 49ers, I think a little bit with the Giants, and the Steelers come back around and make you the youngest assistant coach in football at 25, if I'm correct. And then your time comes, and I think there's a funny story a little bit here. There's a time that comes that you get to be the DC. But I think Chuck has a different way of telling you, doesn't he?
It was crazy, yeah. I'm 25 years old, out of football. Coach Noel calls, said, I think you've got a good head. I think you'd enjoy it. Do you want to work on the staff? So I'm there coaching at 25 years old. And I asked him, I said, what's my job? What am I supposed to do? And he told me something, Ken, that I never forgot. He said, Tony, your only job as a coach is to help your players be better. And it was that simple. And as soon as he said that, Austin, the light went on in my mind. Man, that's why I love this guy, because he wasn't he never thought he was the boss. He never thought he was the smartest guy. He never thought his job was anything other than to help his players. And so for the next 28 years, that became what I did. So I start out and I'm doing all these chores, and then I get promoted to defensive backfield coach, and then the USFL comes into play, and they raid our coaching staff, and we lose 3 coaches. And now we're not sure what Coach Noel is going to do because we lose all our defensive coaches. And I'm sitting there, I wonder what he's going to do. Is he going to bring in another guy? Is he going to promote me? And we go to the combine was in New Orleans that year. And I'm talking to my wife, and she says, well, why don't you just ask him what he's going to do? So I said, well, I'll ask him. But before I could, he said, do you want to go tonight with me, go to Preservation Hall? And I didn't know what Preservation Hall was, but I thought, well, maybe he's going to tell me what's happening. So I'll go. It's this little jazz place. We go hear this guy play the saxophone, and Coach Noel, wasn't he great? Wasn't he good? And I said, yeah, he was really good. We go back to the hotel. He says, well, good night. We'll see you tomorrow morning. And we've got these players to interview and stuff. So I called my wife, and I said, he didn't say anything. We just went to see this guy play the saxophone, and that was it. I said, well, you better ask him. So the next morning, we're walking over to the Dome, and I said, Coach, I have a question for you. Do you know what you're going to do at defensive coordinator? Do I have a chance to move up and be promoted? And he said, well, of course you're the defensive coordinator. Nobody knows more about the defense than you do. I said, well, it would have been nice if you told me.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Well, you mentioned the name, so let's talk about the most important thing that happened in Pittsburgh, and tell us about how did you meet Lauren, and why she's the one, and describe what makes her so special, Tony.
That was another God story, Ken. I just started 1981 back on the coaching staff, and I have been so serious in my football career, playing career. I haven't really dated, had a couple of dates, but I was just totally focused on trying to be the best player I could be. Well, now I'm in the working world, and where am I going to meet someone? How am I going to find someone? And the Friday before Father's Day, the Steelers always sent a representative to St. Stephen's Church, a big church in the Pittsburgh area, and they sent a representative to this father and son breakfast. So Friday night, I get this call from the chaplain, Hollis Half. It's very late, and he says, "Hey, Tony, I need a favor from you. Ted Peterson was supposed to go to the St. Stephen's banquet, and he's sick. He can't go. Can you go tomorrow morning?" I'm like, "Hollis, what time? 8 o'clock in the morning?" I don't want to. Hey, I need it. Do it for the Lord. So I said, okay, I'll go. I get to this big church. It's a nice affair, but the pastor says, where's Ted Peterson? I was supposed to introduce him. Said, he's sick. He can't come. I'm the representative. He said, well, can you sit down beside me? Tell me a few things about yourself so I can at least give you a proper introduction. So I sat with Pastor Guest. I gave my testimony, talked to the men. After it was over, he said, boy, I really appreciate you coming. And I don't know how to say this, but there's a girl in this congregation you really ought to meet. And I'm thinking, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. Well, he stays after it. He calls Hollis, gets my phone number, keeps calling me. And about a month goes by. And he finally gets me to agree to at least go see her. So he gives me the number. I call her up and I go meet her. And she's this beautiful young lady comes out. And it was love at first sight. And we were engaged about 4 months later.
Wow, that's awesome.
What makes her special, Tony?
She was a school teacher, loves kids. We have 11 kids now. Our last 8 of that group is adopted because she just really, really has a heart for kids. She loves the Lord, and we've been married 41 years, but it's really both of us being focused on Christ. I think that it makes it so special.
Wow. Well, then you jump to the Chiefs, which is where I first meet you. I'm a player. You're a coach. I think, I don't know if you remember, Pauline and I and you and Lauren were at a PAO conference, I think actually in Tampa.
Yeah, I do remember it. Yeah.
And then you go to the Vikings, and I can remember I was at the Orlando Thunder in '92 and came to visit you. I guess you guys were playing the Bucks, and I can remember sitting in your hotel room and just talking through. You were going through a time where I guess you were a hot coach, but you couldn't get the job. You had these interviews, and I'd like you just to share, Tony, with people, what were you going through in your mind, your emotions, your conversations you're having with God when you're getting the interview, but you're not getting the job as a head coach?
Yeah, that was a crazy time. I started very young, and of course the Steelers had some success, so my name gets thrown out there. We had some great defenses in Kansas City the 3 years I was there, and then, as you mentioned, '92 I go to the Vikings, and in '93 we lead the league in defense. Well, now people are starting to say this guy's 37, 38 now, and has been around Chuck Nolan, Marty Schottenheimer, and Denny Green, and been very, very productive. So now I'm starting to get these interviews. And I'd never really thought about being a head coach before then. But now my name's in the paper. People are talking about it. And I am feeling like I could do it. Well, I start to get these interviews, and they all seem like they're going well. But then there'd always be something that would kind of derail things. Whether it's one owner asked me, well, I paid $350 million for this team. Is this going to be the most important thing in your life? Are you going to deliver me a Super Bowl? And is this team going to be the most important thing? And I said, sir, I'll deliver you a Super Bowl, but no, it's not going to be the most important thing in my life. I didn't get that job. Another guy asked me, I love everything about you, but I just done some research. It says you don't raise your voice a lot. You don't use profanity. How are you going to motivate these guys? We've got some tough guys on this team. And I said, well, all the people I've been around, especially my dad, you show people that you care about them, you develop a relationship, and then they want to do everything. They'll run through a wall for you. And so I plan on building these type of relationships, get very close to the players, and I think they'll be motivated by the way I treat them. And the guy said, I don't think that'll work in the NFL. So I didn't get that done. So now I'm starting to get from the outside. I explain to my friends what's happening in the outside influence as well. Maybe you need to either change where you're doing things. Maybe you can't be so close to your players. Maybe you do have to be a little bit more of a jerk at times. Or maybe you can't be so honest. Just give them the answers that they want to hear. And I remember talking to our chaplain with the Vikings, Tom Lamphere, and telling him about this and getting discouraged, and maybe I do have to change the way I do things. And Tom gave me some great advice. He said, don't worry about anything else. The Lord has you here for a season. Be the best assistant coach you can be. Keep putting him first, and he's got a spot for you. Don't worry about when or where. Just be available and be ready when he sets the table for you. So he and I actually went through the book of Nehemiah to learn some lessons about leadership. And we went through it for 2 years, and it was just perfect. But then at the end of that time, that's when the Bucks called, and that's the place God had for me.
Wow.
I know there was a lot of elation at that point too, going to the Bucks. But Austin, you wanted to ask him something. I know about the philosophy.
Oh yeah. But before I ask that, I just wanted, there's so much in the Bible about waiting. And, I think, we talked to another guy on this podcast, and he said, and behind the scenes, we talked about like the hardest thing about waiting is, how was the phrase, Dad? Not losing your head along the way to get into the other side.
I think he said roadblocks are just a guide to where God is taking you. The key is keeping your head while you're waiting.
And, I've walked through a lot of waiting myself. And, I know for me, I've had many times where, it's just the waiting. There's so much that goes into your head, and you think, and you constantly think. Do you have any advice about, what you've experienced in your waiting periods of your life?
It really is. It's something we know, Austin, but it's hard to get through because we know from experience. I waited on the draft, didn't get drafted, and God had the best place for me. I waited for a wife, and God had the best one for me. So you know that in your mind, but then when the next one happens, gosh, it's so. What do I do? And you just drive yourself nuts. And that's what I was doing in Minnesota. And fortunately, Tom Lamphere was there to kind of help me keep my head on. Hey, you've got a good job. You're doing some things for the Lord here. He's got a plan for you. And right now, his plan is for you to be in Minnesota. So you just have to be patient until he shows you where it's going to be. But it's hard. We're just not patient people. And disappointments, our emotions go like roller coasters. And that's how I was for a time. And then when I calmed down and just said, you know what, I am going to just wait, that's when it happened.
It is amazing how God does that. It's like because the same thing with meeting my wife. It was to the point where I was giving up, and then boom, I met her. It was truly a God thing. So, yeah. Well, thank you for the wisdom on that. But Coach, as far as your coaching philosophy, obviously you touched on it. You have people like Chuck Knoll who's poured into you the wisdom, and then obviously your parents and the stuff that they've taught you, and other people along the way. Can you kind of summarize how you would describe your coaching philosophy?
Yeah, I think I learned from so many of those people, but number one, I think coaching is teaching. Coach Knoll used to have a saying, pressure is what you feel when you don't know what to do. If you know what to do, you won't feel pressure. So his idea for the coaches was we've got to teach our players. We teach them what to do, then they're going to come through at the highest level at the right time because they'll be nice and relaxed because they'll be very confident in knowing what to do. So teaching what to do and how to do it. And then I always think that there's two ways you can coach. You can coach with encouragement or you can coach with intimidation. And I think the encouragement lasts a lot longer and it's more effective. And so I always wanted to coach that way. I wanted guys on my staff that were that way, that were encouragers. So those are probably the two things. And then the third thing Coach Knoll taught me is you can't have one blueprint that you follow. Many times you hear the phrase "my way or the highway." Well, Coach Knowles said we don't want to put half our team on the highway. So if we only have one way to do it, that's not going to be very good for us. We don't want that. So you have to find out what your players need. And I started out, I had 7 guys in the defensive backfield. He said, you got to get to know those guys. What's important to them? What do they need? Some guys need encouragement. Some guys need direction. Some guys need teaching. Some guys may need a little motivation. But whatever it is, you have to deliver that. So if you're only coaching one way, you might reach one guy, but you might not reach the other 6. So it can't be just, well, this is my way of doing things. You have to do what's best to help the players. And I kept that philosophy from 7 to when I became the defensive coordinator and I had 30 guys to the head coach at 53. You have to reach everyone.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, I mean, we've been talking about this kind of on our podcast where my dad and I just talk about. We talk about, trying to search for, okay, what does a kingdom coach look like? And we've talked about, there's someone who sees differently and hears differently. And what's so unique about that? Well, it's to understand the heart of the people that you're with. And when you understand the people that you're with, you're better equipped to then help draw out what's in them and then get the best versions of themselves. I mean, I know for me and some of my journey is it's you're not trying to make them into you. You're trying to make or to get the best out of who they are. And that's something that, I've been walking through in my own journey as I learned about coaching. So.
Amen. And I think, too, as a kingdom coach, you have another goal in mind. Yes, you want to be excellent. Yes, you want to win championships. And I told our owner, Mr. Glazer, when I did get the Buccaneers job, I said, hey, we want to deliver Super Bowls, and we plan on doing that. But I have an even bigger goal. I want our team to represent the Tampa Bay area and represent it well. I want our players to be role models. I want them to be involved in the community and make a difference the whole year, not just during the season. So yes, we want to win, and yes, we're going to be dedicated. Yes, we're going to be excellent, but that's not the most important thing. And I got that across to the team. I'll never forget my first meeting with the Bucs. They had 13 straight losing seasons. So I come in and say, I'm your new coach and I'm here and we're here to win. We want to win a Super Bowl, but we've got to win it the right way. And then I went on for about 45 minutes to talk about those kind of things. And Derek Brooks came into my office afterwards, and he's a second-year player. He came in, he said, Coach, I lost more games last year with the Bucs than I lost in my whole life. You talked about 5 minutes about how are we going to win games? And I said, no, I did talk about that, Derek, but the way that I talked about it, that's how we're going to win. We're going to win by being great teammates. We're going to win by sacrificing. We're going to win by being great role models. Hey, you're good enough athletes. We got to put all this other stuff together. And when Derek got it, he was the number one guy who then promoted it to the rest of the team, and he's still doing it 25 years later.
Well, that's amazing. It's like he had to question it at first, and then it ended up, strengthening his buy-in. That's awesome.
You mentioned Tampa. You're there, I think, 6 years, have some great seasons, fall short of a Super Bowl. And I'd like you just to share, Tony, with our people. Because, again, people hear Tony Dungy and they think, oh, that guy's got it all together. Life's perfect. He never has any issues. And that's what we try to do here is to draw the true spiritual storyline within each of our lives, because the story is awesome. I mean, we all have one. They're given to us by our Father. So when you get fired, I think there's even a moment you're thinking about getting out of football. What's going through your mind, Tony?
Yeah, we had, 13 straight losing seasons. We come my second year. We're in the playoffs. We're in the playoffs almost every year after that. But we keep losing, in the playoffs. And we got close to the Super Bowl in '99, didn't get there. Everybody's a little frustrated. Our ownership comes to me after the 01 season and says, we think you've taken the team as far as you can take them. We're going to make a change because we don't think you're the person that can get us to a Super Bowl. And that was hurtful to hear. I thought I was doing everything the Lord's way. We've got a lot of great things going on. We're competing every year. We're in the upper echelon, and they said it wasn't good enough. And so now I go back with my wife, Lauren, and we pray about it. And what is God trying to tell us? Maybe we love Tampa, and maybe there's some other ministry. Maybe there's a different reason He has for me not to be the Bucs head coach anymore. Maybe it's to stay in Tampa and do something else. Wasn't really sure. So we're praying about it, and 2 days later, I get a phone call, and it's Jim Irsay, the owner of the Colts, and he says, I just made a change at head coach, and here's why I'm calling you. I love what you did in Tampa. I love the way you put things together. We have just moved here from Baltimore to Indianapolis. We don't have a decades-long fan base. We need to connect with our community. What you did in Tampa is exactly what I'm looking for. I want you to be our coach. This is not a job interview. I'm offering you the job. Just do not have your agent call me back in 20 minutes. Just tell me how much money you want. And I was absolutely stunned. But when he talked about connecting with the community and winning the right way and doing things in a first-class manner, and I knew I was going to be able to be the person that I wanted to be, we just had a connection right away from that first phone call.
Wow. I know Austin has a question about the Colts. Go ahead, Austin.
Well, my favorite player growing up is Peyton Manning. So do you have any cool Peyton Manning stories that only you, from your perspective, would know?
I have a 1,000 Peyton Manning stories, but I'll tell you a couple that really resonate. The hardest working, most dedicated guy I've ever been around. Talented, but work ethic off the charts. So we're getting ready for the Super Bowl. We've got 2 weeks to prepare for the Chicago Bears, and we're up there. Peyton watched every game that they played during the season. He watched both their playoff games. He's got a couple of new plays he wants to put in because he's seen some things that worked against him. But if that wasn't enough, he had Jim Sorgi, our backup quarterback, watch the 16 games from the year before in case there's anything there that they might spring on us. So he's going through all this and, coming in with these new plays. And I'm like, Peyton, okay. Then he comes to me and says, and while I'm doing this, Coach, I just happened to look at the 14-day forecast, and it might rain. I think we have to practice with wet balls. I'm thinking, it has never rained in 40 Super Bowls. No, we're not going to practice with wet balls. But he's persistent. So we take a day, we practice with wet balls, and of course it rains the whole day.
Yes.
But that is him to a T. Second one that's really more in line with what we're saying here. We had this tradition that I started with Coach Noel. It's called Family Saturdays, where our Saturday practice, you brought your kids. He wanted the kids to know where the dads were. It was kind of a lighter, relaxed deal. So I enjoyed that as a player. When I got to Tampa, I put it in. Our players really loved it. I got to Indy, and I put it in. This is how practices are going to be on Saturday. Well, Peyton, in his kind of the way he did things Saturday, he would write down every play that wasn't perfect on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then he'd want to run them again. He'd have 25 plays to run on Saturday. So when I first broached this and we had the kids out on the field, then he comes to me and says, I don't know about this Saturday routine. I'm trying to throw 60 X-hook to Marvin, and he's got little Marvin. He's really just not running full speed. I don't know if this is going to work. So I said, trust me, we won a lot of Super Bowls with it. So for 5 years, it was kind of a running joke with him. Fast forward, he goes to Denver, and in the meantime, he has twins. He goes to Coach John Fox after he has twins. We need to put Family Saturday where the dad work. And Denver put in Family Saturdays, and it really blessed my heart. But tremendous guy, great player, and a great teammate.
So, Coach, coaching him, someone who's so motivated internally, how did you draw the best out of him, do you think?
I had to get him to relax a little bit, to focus in and trust the system. And I remember when I first got there, he thought, hey, I've got to win games and I've got to be dynamic. We've got to be explosive. Tom Moore, who coached me in college, was his coach there, and I kept him on the staff, so I knew how he was being coached. But I had to convince him that, we're going to be okay. And if we punt, it's not the end of the world. If we learn to take care of the ball, we're going to be almost unbeatable because we're so proficient on offense. If we run 85 plays, we're going to score a ton of points. But if we only run 60 plays because we turn it over a couple times, that's how we're going to lose. Well, it took him a little while to buy into that. But by his third year, the third year I was with him, that was the year he threw 49 touchdown passes and only 9 interceptions. And I said, we're going to be hard to beat from here on out.
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to jump to family. And Tony, we talked already about Lauren, but one more question about her. How did Lauren make you a better coach?
I think just having someone to bounce things off that when I would come home at night, to have someone who wasn't just totally wrapped up in the dynamics of it, who could look from afar and say, well, maybe this doesn't make sense, or maybe you should try this, or maybe here's what the Lord is saying to you. But she allowed me to keep that balance that I think is really, really important.
Good wife.
Yes.
Austin.
So Coach, tell us a little bit about maybe you said you had 11 children. Can you tell us a little bit about your children?
Yes, we, our first daughter was born when we were young. I was a young coach in Pittsburgh, and then we had 2 other boys born, and now I'm kind of climbing the ladder. We've got a nice family of 5 and doing great. When we get to Tampa in 1996, I'm 45 years old, or I'm 40 years old now, but the kids are growing, and we run into this agency in Pittsburgh who it's called Heart of Adoptions, and they really took young women and encouraged them not to have abortions, and said if you go through with it, but you really feel like you can't raise a child, we will find a Christian 2-parent home for them. Well, the lady who runs it told my wife and I, could you help us do some public service because we're short on adoptive parents? Well, my wife Lauren heard that, and no, we can't be short on adoptive parents. We'll do the public service announcement, but we need the help. So I was 45. I think our youngest son, Eric, was 8 or 9 at the time. And Lauren says, we really need to do this. So we adopted a little baby, 1-day-old baby, and it was very evident that God had that was his plan.
Yeah.
So we did it 7 more times over of the next few years.
Well, I don't know how you do it, Coach.
11-person family.
I got 4 of my own, so.
So our second wave is pretty active, and they're now at home from 17 to 8 now.
Oh, wow.
We had Mark Richt on here a couple of weeks ago, and he's also adopted a couple kids. And in this process, Austin and I were just listening to the Spirit. And it's interesting. There's 2 verses, Tony, and you probably know them both. In Psalm 127:1, it says, children are a gift from the Lord. And then what was really cool is another verse in the scriptures, Ephesians 1:11, talks about he chose us and he adopted us as sons and daughters. And so when you look at the parallel of a child that's given by natural birth, it's a gift. And then how beautiful the picture is, you are choosing that person in adoption to bring them into your home. And just the parallel of being chosen in adoption and being given as a gift, how beautiful God works in those. And so I guess my question, Tony, about the parenting is, can you describe your journey as a father and what has remained consistent throughout this journey of 11 children?
I think I've learned a little bit more about what's important to kids and what they need. And we've seen it both ways. We've seen it from the natural children and the adoptive children. And what they need is really literally no different. They need parents who are involved. They need parents who are committed to them. And if you love them and give them time, that's the important thing. I remember a great story. I was getting honored by a parenting organization in San Antonio several years back, and Eric, our third child, he was like 8 years old. And so I said, hey, tell me something. I want to give a story about something really special we've done together. And so I'm thinking he's going to say, well, I held your court at the Pro Bowl, or you did this, or he'd done a million things. He said, well, remember when we didn't have our equipment and we just had to make a baseball out of tape and we used a broom and I beat you 22-3 in tape baseball? That was the biggest thing. And that told me, it's not the grandiose things. It's not the special trips. It's not, none of that. It's just being around and being available when they need you. That's what's important.
Well said. Well, we're going to jump to the last segment here and close with a few questions about legacy. So, Austin, you want to ask Coach?
Yeah. Coach, how does your kingdom perspective influence the many areas of your life?
I think I do, partly from my parents and partly from the Bible, from that 1 Corinthians 9:25, is looking at the things that are really important and eternal. And so it has made me think about what really matters. At the end of the day, and now that I'm retired, the fact we won a Super Bowl, is that really the most important thing? Is, 10 playoffs or whatever? No, when you run into people and they talk about the impact that you had on the community and being around, it's so neat. Tell you a quick story there. I always talk to the players about getting involved in the community. And Warwick Dunn came to us my second year in Tampa, and he came to me and said, I heard you, Coach, and I want to do something. My mom was a single mom, and I want to honor her. I'd love to take some of my bonus money and get a single mom in a home. And so he did that after his rookie year in 1998. And it was really special. And the people in Tampa celebrated, and it was just awesome. And I just got a note from him the other day, and he said, Coach, you'd be happy to know I just did my 300th house.
Wow.
Wow.
Think about that. And, that's way more important than, hey, we went to the playoffs in 97, or we won the championship game. No, those kind of things. That's legacy. That's eternal.
Well, you planted the seed, and 300 people have benefited from that. That's amazing.
Really
Wow.
gratifying.
With all the hats you've worn, Tony, which one do you think has the most value, or you treasure your most in your heart?
Well, I definitely love being a dad. I love the fact that I was a coach and that I was able to influence a number of young men and a young number of staff people. Again, you talk about legacy. I look at, Lovie Smith taking the Chicago Bears to the Super Bowl, Mike Tomlin taking the Pittsburgh Steelers to the Super Bowl, and knowing that Jim Caldwell took the Colts to the Super Bowl. So there's three guys who are on my staff who kind of took things with them. And not only did they go to Super Bowls and win, but they influenced men. They had family Saturdays for practice. And just, and who have they touched? And,
Yeah.
so I think that's a legacy, and it goes back to my dad and Coach Noel.
Yeah.
Awesome.
What has been the most significant moment in your spiritual journey up until this point?
I think the most significant moment for me was in that dorm room in St. Vincent's back in 1977. And Donnie Shell, I'm in the bed, he's in the other bed, and he said, well, so what did you read today? And I said, well, I didn't really read anything. I was really busy trying to learn the playbook. And so he told me what he read in the Bible. And then the next night he says, so what did you read today? And I said, I really hadn't gotten anything, Donnie. And he told me what he read during the day and why it was important. So I think I better read something when he asks me tomorrow. I better have something to say. So just being there and turning the corner with him, reading the Bible every day, trying to hear from the Lord and prayer time. And so that was the beginning of me really accelerating my spiritual journey. And Donnie Shell and J.T. Thomas and John Stallworth and John Kolb, those guys, they lit the fuse under me.
I tried to, as we've gone through the podcast, highlight some of these moments, knowing this question was going to come towards the very end. When you look back, you quit your high school football team and all the emotions that are involved in that. You have the disappointment of not getting drafted, not maybe playing QB. Then you have these highs of getting your first head job in Tampa. You get the Super Bowl opportunity in the Colts. You get fired in Tampa. All these emotions. So here's the question, Tony. How has your faith, really you understanding your identity, helped you navigate all these highs and lows in your life through the world of sports?
It really has, Ken. I think my Christian faith and my beliefs and understanding the Bible has been the key for me to go through the ups and downs. Different problems, different things that are very, very small, but they seem big at the time. The mountaintop experiences where you could get carried away with yourself if you're not careful. Losing a son, which none of us ever expect, and it's just hard to even imagine. To be able to go through those things and stay on an even keel, it can only be the Lord, and that's definitely what it's been in my life.
Well said. Well, last question for you, Tony, is when someone encounters Tony Dungy, how do they experience Papa, and how do you want to be remembered?
I've been asked that a lot lately, and I want to be remembered as somebody who tried to bring the Lord to other people, who tried to shine the light on Jesus in whatever I did. And if I'm remembered that way, that would be great. I'd love to be remembered by my children the same way I remember my dad, as somebody who was there all the time for me, who directed me in the right way, who had the answers for the questions that I had, and who really cared about them. And if I'm remembered that way as a coach, as a dad, and in the community, I would be very, very happy.
We always end with final words. Is there anything that you would want to say to the listeners, Tony, that maybe we've not covered? And then Austin, you can share yours, and I'll close us.
I guess my final words would be my mom's favorite verse in the Bible that she passed down to us, and has become my favorite verse, Matthew 16:26. What would it profit a man to gain the whole world if you forfeit your soul? And I just would encourage people and urge them, don't get so caught up in the things of this world that you're chasing after something, but you don't chase after Christ and don't chase after eternity, because that's not going to benefit you.
Well said. We had a listener, or not a listener, a guest a couple of weeks ago said, it reminded us of the verse where it says, his goodness and mercy chases after us every day, in one of the versions. And you think about him chasing after us. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think Cece Winans is one of my favorite artists, and she does a song where she says, "You're running after me. Your love is running after me," and that's what I get that picture of God just pursuing us. And all we need to do is just slow down a little bit and let him catch us, and we'll be
catch me. Yeah. Austin, final words for Coach.
Well, I know for me, Coach, I'm just first off grateful that you would take the time to do this. I know you're a very busy person, but I can just, I've watched you, obviously because you've been on TV my whole life, but just you coming on and spending time and the way you just communicate your story. It's just I sense a presence about you of the Spirit, and it's just really encouraging, and it's very humble. It's very, in our profession that we work in, it can be very egotistical and very about your achievements and what, making my name great. And I just, you carry a presence that's different. Like your book says, uncommon, or, I can sense the presence of God, being shared through you. So I appreciate your vulnerability and just who you are as a person and what you stand for in the kingdom. So,
well, thank you, Austin. It's been great being on with you, and I just had the sense, I know you have a dad like the dad I had, and that's a real blessing.
I'm truly blessed by my dad. Yes.
Well, Tony, I don't want to get emotional because I have the utmost respect for you, always have, and I know that you are a person that lives who you say you are on and off the field. Now it's in all the other endeavors, you got a heart for people, and I know our listeners will be really blessed by your story. I'm grateful that you've taken the opportunity to share it. Please tell Lauren that Pauline and I say hello and wish you all love. And hopefully we'll get to see each other again in the future. But thank you for your time. And I just want to encourage our listeners to continue to listen to Awaken Kingdom Culture, where hearts and minds come alive, one story at a time.